Hello and welcome to our conversation. This is the Me to You Marketing Show. I am Dr. Jennifer Brenton. I am joined by our co-host, Dr. Matthew Champagne.
Hey, friends.
Hello. And lovely Anita Toth.
Hello.
We are here today on episode 4 of season 1, talking about reciprocity versus closing the loop as psychological triggers, both a little bit more on the negative side and a lot more on the positive side, that are used in marketing and sales. And this is Dr. Champagne and Anita's time to shine. So please take it away.
Well, how about that for an intro? Anita, do you want to kick us off with what reciprocity is about and how it's used?
In the digital marketing world, absolutely. I first came across this, I'm not even sure how long ago, didn't even know what it was. It's this whole concept of, if I give you a download, then, and I'm giving it to you for free, then you reciprocate by giving me your email first. So I didn't realize that this is what it was, this idea of, well, in order for you to get something, you've got to give me something first. And in the digital marketing world, one of the key pieces that we always push people toward is to build these big email lists. So then when it comes time to do a launch, we can, send information out to that list and hopefully eventually make a sale from those emails. So this whole concept of reciprocity, and I give you a download or a video or something like that, first you have to give me your email, is all based around this concept later on that you will use that email list that you've curated into one of the biggest methods of letting people know that they can purchase a product or a service from you. So it's pervasive. We use it everywhere. I'm sure now that I'm mentioning it, that you'll be thinking in your minds about times where you have had to enter an email address to get some content. And that is what is considered reciprocity in the digital marketing lexicon of terms.
Yeah, and we talk on this podcast and elsewhere about relationship building. And this is the antithesis of relationship building, because if, a relationship will fail if your attitude is, well, I'll give you this if you give me that. I'm going to put in 50% and then you put in 50% and then that's 100%. But that's how relationships fail. To make a relationship work, I'll put in 100% and I'm going to expect nothing. That's how a relationship works. And the other person puts in 100% and expects nothing. And that's where the magic of a relationship works. So this notion of kind of tit for tat. And then you get into the problems of, well, is my 50% equal to your 50%? I'm asking you for your email address. And I think that's pretty lame compared to my great offer. I'm giving a top 10 list of the best ways of doing this or that. So I think you're not putting in as much as I'm putting in. And from your side, you're saying, this is my email address. I'm going to give you, you now have an insider's view. You can contact me at any time. That's a lot of value. It's not as valuable as your top 10 list. So right off the bat, it's not an equivalent relationship. And each of you might be thinking you're putting in more than the other. That's where this reciprocity falls apart immediately most every time.
So I have a question, because I have a family history of, how do I want to say? So my grandfather, he sold hardware goods and a grocery. He was in charge of a grocery store. And, the kind of relationship he had in a small town with the people that were buying from him, I mean, the reciprocity was pretty cut and dry. You buy my good and give me money for it. How is this different? Like, I can, hear a lot of people saying, well, I'm confused. How in the world is this, what is this relationship supposed to be about? I'm not in the art of charity work here, at some point we need to be converting and having money, or I can't even afford the website to give people something that they would be able to give me something back. So how is this, what kind of relationships are we talking about here, I guess, is a good question that I can see people asking.
Well, and that's the key question they should be asking, because as you just brought up, the notion of reciprocity has been discussed at least for a couple of centuries. It's been researched and discussed and argued over, and there's talk of balanced and symmetrical reciprocity and unbalanced and unstable. There's all these concepts because it is a very important, deep issue. And that's what we should be thinking through, is what reciprocity means. But instead, the online marketing gurus just say, oh, well, this is reciprocity. You just apply this, you ask for their email and they give you that, check. Okay, reciprocity is done. As if the whole notion of reciprocity can be encapsulated into just this little tactic that you use. And people use the tactic thinking that they've now checked off reciprocity on their list when they've done no such thing.
So what really is reciprocity as a negative psychological trigger? Like, why would I feel obligated to do anything or buy anything through reciprocity? How does that actually work? Please step me through it.
So for coming from my perspective, again, the marketing world, the whole idea, and I'm not even sure where it started, is that if I give you something for free, then now you have some sort of obligation to give me something back, something that I deem as valuable, which is an email address. Again, this whole concept of having these huge email lists to be able to sell later on, then that email address becomes very, very valuable, which is why I think just stepping back a tiny bit, I think part of the reason we've got this so simplistic concept of reciprocity is that somewhere along the line, somebody took this concept of, well, I gave you something, now you have to give me something in return, simplified it down to this single item of, well, I'll give you a free download or a free video if you just give me your email address, because that's really what I want, because then I can retarget you, I can put you on my list and put you in a big sales funnel and hopefully get a sale from you. That's become the idea of reciprocity in the digital marketing realm. And I agree with Matt, like, it's not. First of all, we come up with this idea of, well, we're giving people value. We'll give them something for free. But is it really free? If I say to you, I've got this great thing that you are interested in, but first you have to give me your email, it's not really free. I have to give up something that is important to me, i.e. my email address, knowing full well that I will likely be put into some sort of funnel that I may or may not want to be put into. And right there, this is unbalanced. This is not free. You're telling me if I have to give up something valuable to get that. So going back to what you had asked with Jennifer, with the store example, people are going in to buy because that is what they want. It is understood. But in digital marketing, we cloak it in saying, well, I'm giving value, I'm giving something for free, so these people should be in some way grateful or feel a sense of obligation to give me something back. And that thing that I want back is very valuable to me, and that is their email address. So it's coming in from very different perspectives. I go into a store and I know that this item right here that I want is $3. I hand $3 over and this is what I get back. But when I see, free download, and then I've got to give my email address first, that is not even an equal exchange going into it. Why do I have to give my email address to get something that you just told me is free? So I think that that's where it comes in, and we have, like Matt mentioned, just totally simplified this idea of reciprocity, and it's almost now more obligation, because I'm giving you this amazing thing, all you have to give me is a tiny email address. And then, it feels like it's been balanced.
Yeah, I really like that concept of not really respecting the value of what's being given when somebody does give an email address. It's not, now granted, you can be very savvy and have a specific email account for all of this that you dump it all into. My daughter, for instance, will do this if she's looking for coupons, things like that. Very savvy. However, you're still, this concept of the fact that we're not really being completely upfront with what people are giving, the value of what people are giving us. I really like this discussion, because I have often thought that it's not really just an email address that people are giving. Just by virtue of being on the site, they're being tagged. So if they do use Facebook, that's is something where they can be retargeted on Facebook. They're really giving up a piece of their privacy. And yes, we have terms of condition or terms of service and privacy and all of that. But it's my partner, for instance, he'll sign up for just about everything because he's really not concerned about this. Whereas on the other hand, I'm terribly concerned about this because I don't feel like I'm always up to date with how easily someone can track me / market to me. And so I'm not always completely sure exactly what I'm giving up. But like I said, I do like this discussion about a lack of respect for what people are giving in exchange. So really what you're saying is that this is transactional. What someone's really giving for this, it's the same thing as my grandfather standing behind the desk or his checkout counter, and he gives someone some flour and he takes some money in return. What we're really doing is the same thing. We're taking, instead of money in return, we're taking an email address / targeting and a little bit of privacy in return, which may be more valuable than any payment that could be asked for it. But we don't know because we're not really even sure what that exchange is. Truly both, I think, for the person who's getting that information, but more importantly, I think sometimes as marketers, we have to be very careful that when we are selling to people that we also are very much honoring and respecting that. And there are people watching. The FTC is watching what we're doing with this. But even with that, I see very few videos that say, thank you for your email address. And this is really the exchange that we're doing here. But let's say for the sake of argument that someone is really upfront about that. That really is a transaction again. I mean, there's a relationship there where, store proprietor, I'm providing a service. We may be neighbors, but that's an outside interaction. And I think what you're both saying here is, please stop cloaking this as if it's a relationship. This is not a relationship. It's still transactional. Is that what we're bringing up here?
Well, it's that. The other layer to it is people don't, the examples that you give, like with your grandfather, bartering, or maybe you and I will barter. I'll do something for you and you'll do something for me. This is all one-on-one. And even then it's kind of complex. You tell your, sweetheart, I'll take the trash out if you'll pick up the dog, and you go back. But even with one-on-one with people, it still gets unbalanced. There's still disagreements about what's fair, and it was at an equitable situation, one-on-one. Now multiply this times you, one on thousands. And I'm going to take your email and I'm going to give you this. And you're just assuming that this relationship is fair for everybody that you deal with. It's just not. You can barely do it with one-on-one. So that's another layer to this, is people are different, rule of psychology number one, and to just feel like this is an equal exchange, not only for you, but for you and for everybody else I deal with, is just false.
Yeah, again, the exchange for an email address, I've recognized for an awfully long time the value of an email address and the privacy. And, I'm that person who will walk into the store where they're like, well, do you want to give us your Saver card? And I'm like, no, I'll pay extra cash for my privacy. Thanks so much. That's just me, because I put a monetary value on my privacy. And I have to say that in exchange for an email address, and yes, I'm one of those people that has that email address that's just for these kinds of offers. I have to say I have received quite a bit of value in exchange for kind of setting up that currency in my own life. But I guess I really do like the fact that that there's this illusion that really is starting a conversation, or that's really starting a relationship. And when in fact it really is just a transaction, just like walking into a store, purchasing a stick of gum and coming back. And, we may have permission to market a second kind of gum to them, but what changes this then from transactional to a relationship? Can you please help talk about that transition with closing the loop?
Yeah, I was actually just going to comment on one thing that really makes a big difference between what your grandfather experienced, where he was, giving a product for money. You often knew what you were buying. When we land on somebody's site or we see an offer and they have this, whatever download or whatever it is that we want, I have no idea how valuable that information is. I don't even know if it really applies to me. Am I going to get what they're saying? Like, they call it gated content. It is gated behind a landing page where I have to give my email in order to get it. So it's kind of like, the biggest difference is it's hidden. I don't get to see what I am really getting until I put my email address in there. And so you're already entering, even if you want to call it a relationship or transactional, I'm already entering it with a bit of trepidation, because I really don't know. I have I hate to say it, I have like 4 different accounts that are bogus, depending on what level I think that they might be at. Which email address should I use? Because I don't want to get into their retargeting. I don't want that, because I'm not sure that I really align with this person and what they're giving me. So it's behind a curtain. So there's a huge element of trust there.
Yeah.
That I'm actually going to get what you say I'm going to get, and then it's actually going to work for me. So I think that that's one big difference between the two. And I was going to make another point, and I can't remember it right now. Maybe it will come back. But that was one thing I wanted to say. Well, we have no idea of how useful this will be in exchange for something that I see as very personal to me, i.e. my email address.
Well, right there, I mean, that's when you know something's broken, when people are doing workarounds, and and all of us do the same thing. We all have fake emails and, put just to get stuff. Well, that's the same happening to you. People are giving you fake emails. So you have to look at that and say, well, something must be broken here if people feel they have to do this workaround in order to get something. So right away, that's why we're talking about this topic now, is it's broken.
Well, and I really like what you said about not really knowing what you're going to be getting. For instance, may give the email, may get the download, and then never hear from them again, or may hear from them once or twice, versus, we get the email, we get the download, and then we're hearing from them absolutely every single day. And yes, you can unsubscribe, but then all of a sudden you find out that you're not just on one list, you're on 5 lists. So you're having to continuously unsubscribe. And then all of a sudden you're on lists for people that you've never heard of before, because they give those lists to JV Partners because that was in the terms of service.
So true.
And then you're not really sure exactly where these people are related to your original email. And granted, it all ends up in spam, but yeah, it's a little bit of gamification. And I think that just the mere fact that we are putting these into separate accounts, almost so that we can put them on, have a little bit of a trial. Who are you? How are you going to behave? I kind of need to see that. What is that where when someone's sick, you want to put them in isolation? We're quarantine. We're quarantining their email for a time so that we can kind of figure out exactly what that is. And in a lot of ways, I actually don't think that this is wrong. I just don't think it's relationship. It's a nice way of advertising. It's a nice way of getting a message out there. Yeah. But be a little more open and honest about what it is that we're doing, and also just respect the fact that that is a huge amount of trust that people are giving us, and to pay it back in kind, with respect and trust on the other end. And, just be careful, because the FTC really is watching.
So Matt and I were talking about this earlier, and I was really hung up because even our landing page software that you buy, and there's so many different, kinds that you can buy where their themes are already made and different things like that. But it's all of them have this system baked in, where it's like you have the landing page, you capture the email, and then you go to either it sends the content via email, or they can consume it right away if that's the case. And I kept saying to Matt, so if we want to get rid of this idea of, well, if you want what's behind this, magic curtain here, just provide your email address, what would that look like? Because I want to know how can we actually implement this stuff. So we were chatting, and I remember, I wish I could, tell you exactly where I saw it. But a long time ago, before we started doing this gated content, give me your email concept, people used to actually put the content directly on the next page. So when it said, click here for this free information, people would click, and it would be right there. There was no, capturing of emails. So I remember watching this, and I was like, wow, that's amazing that they used to do that. We stopped doing it because the email list became the thing you wanted. And we've put this new system in where, as Matt, pointed out, we're trying to figure out hacks around it to still get what we want with these, using dummy emails. So what would this look like today? And I think it goes back to what was originally there. If it says, download your free whatever, or watch this video, when you click on that button, it should take you right away to that content. Because there's also an issue that we do hear about, whether people actually consume the content that they just signed up for. Because often with the emails, you have to wait till it comes, and then it gets lost in spam, or it just gets lost, or you think I'll get to it later and you forget about it. But this concept of you click the button and it's right there. And then, I said to him, well, how do we start a relationship out of this? How do we get an email address? And so we were just chatting, brainstorming about this, and we can put it at the bottom and say, and if you'd like other types of information like this, put in your email address. Because then if it's a good fit, they will feel like, yeah, I'd like to receive more stuff like this. And they enter their email. If they read it and they're like, it wasn't great, or, I didn't like how this person presented the information, they can just not enter their email address. And then it feels that it's genuine. I gave what I said I was going to give, and it's now up to the individual who consumed that content to make the decision whether they want to continue the relationship further. Not through an unsubscribe button after the fact, but going into it. So this is kind of what we came up with.
And the timing is wrong, and that's what this addresses. What you're talking about, the timing that the gurus tell us is backwards. It's always, you give me something, your email, and then I'll reward you with the content. And that's backwards. That's not what reciprocity should be. It's you give first, and then people will give back to you. You give 100% and then see how they respond. And Jennifer had mentioned closing the loop. And that's the concept that I use in my own surveys, because people do it backwards in surveys too. They say, you fill out my survey, and then I'm going to enter you in some contest with some unknown chance of winning some prize you already have. Or you fill out my survey first, and then, you get this coupon or something. But when I do a survey, I reverse it. I go to folks and say, look, I have nothing to give you that's as valuable as your time. I'm asking for 5 minutes of your life that you will never get back. I have nothing to give you for that. But if you will fill this out, I'm going to share with you the results of this survey. I'm going to show how you compare to others. I'm going to give you some nuggets of the results. I'm going to show you the top 10 most popular responses. I'm going to show you 10 things that other people said that I think can help you. So even if I need them to give something first, that is, they need to give a response, I acknowledge that they're the ones taking the first step, but I'm giving you first my promise. And my promise is I will give you something that's going to make this worth your time. And that's how I'm able to get 75, 80, 85% of people to fill out a survey, which is crazy. Nobody gets people to fill out that kind of survey. That's because you're asking them to take the full first step, to give of all their time in the hopes of getting something. You got to reverse that and make the timing correct. And that's similar to what Anita is saying with this idea of giving the content first, give them a preview, and then it's their, turn to, to reciprocate.
So we're talking about, as opposed to, a 50-50 exchange or a 75-25, an exchange where someone has to take the full risk up front. So whether it's the content creator who's decided to try and weigh the, trying to get the email address and then taking the risk that it may end up in spam, or they may have someone on their list that just never even interacts. And this isn't inexpensive to be collecting people on a list, or, you're collecting a list of people who are potentially disgruntled people that are going to report, poor service or something like that because they just really are sick of email, versus having a piece of content that is, feels so strongly about, that actually has the name at the bottom and all of that, that maybe is its own advertising that people get without any kind of, give back, in the hopes that that would be both free advertising as well as a piece of content that people may pass around and your name would be known, and then people would want to be interacting more. I can see how that's more, it goes from a 50-50 concept to almost like 100%, and then vice versa. But Matt, how do you then go about telling somebody, hey, you don't know me from anyone, but I really want 5 minutes of your time? Is this typically done in a place where people do really know you before we make the ask, or know us before we make the ask of 5 minutes?
Well, I mean, to me, it's, that you're giving 100% right off the bat. So if I'm doing a survey for some students for career choices, well, I give them something right up front. Say, here's, the top 10 companies that are hiring this summer. I know this because this is, research that I've done, or I've collected this from another survey. I've got this from another source. So you can see for yourself, is that valuable to you? And for most students, they'd say, "Oh, yeah, that I'd like to hear more about that." Then is the request. So it's always the gift first, and then the request. So if I'm to put this on my website or something, I might, put up on the front page, "Hey, I'm Doc Champagne. I help people keep their customers forever. And here is something that I think would really help you if you're an entrepreneur, a small business owner." And there it is. It's just available. As Anita was saying, there's the gift right off the bat. There's no commitment. And we can talk about how to do this in social media and other avenues. But, from my perspective, what I would do is put that on my website, and then they go to that next page and they get the information. Here's the top 10 of this, or here's the 5 greatest influencing, thoughts that I've put into practice, or what have you. And then just let them know, do you want to hear more of this? And if they don't, that's fine, because I want to know that. I mean, this is the relationship building. If I, think if this is valuable to me, this is important to me, I've put my work into this, and I share it with somebody and they don't get it or they don't want it, well, that's fine. I'm okay with that, because I don't want to, that's not my people. And then the folks that it resonates with, those are the ones I want to attract.
What about the concept? I know Digital Marketer talks about this, where that kind of information is put forward in a blog post, for instance, especially a long form blog post. And then at the end of the blog post is an opportunity for something adjunct to that, to offer an email address if people would like a little more information on it or would like to follow up on that conversation. what do you all think about that?
I think that's the point I was getting to, is if they've consumed the content and it resonates with them, it is their decision then to continue on by signing up, putting their email address in. They're not being forced to do it and making that decision before they actually see what they're getting. They've just read something, they determine whether it's valuable or not to them, versus, you know, when we often see, and they're called lead magnets, and I absolutely hate that term, but that's for another conversation, where it is, again, you have to give me your email address first before you can assess the value of what I'm giving you and whether it aligns with you or not. A blog post is a perfect way to give the content first, and then the person can make the decision whether it fit with them, whether they want more or not. They're not being pushed into trying to assess the value before they actually get a sense of what it is they're assessing. I think that that's the biggest difference. And so the challenge for many people, and myself included, is when we're so used to doing something a certain way. In fact, so my website's just being recreated. It should be launched next week. And I have a download that I'm offering. And, you know, when I was creating this download, I was going to do the typical thing. Click here, then give me your email address, and then I'll email it to you. And after this discussion we've had today, I'm going to say no to that and have a button that says, if you want this, click here, and they can consume it right away. At the bottom, I will ask them if they would like to continue to receive more information like this, please put in your email. And so I'm taking a stand that if I want to attract my ideal customers or clients, then these are people who are going to align themselves with me and my writing, the content I put out, the videos I put out. They are going to, and Matt pointed this out, they're going to want to come, versus me forcing, you know, we have this even concept of list sanitization, list hygiene, because we've, you know, when we ask for an email before the person can assess whether they actually align with our values, our products, our services, all of that kind of stuff, then we're going to capture a whole bunch of people who aren't aligned and therefore need to sanitize the list or clean it up to get rid of those people to try then to capture those who really align. So again, it shows the problem with this whole concept of asking for the email first versus what we're talking about, which is putting the option to put their email in at the end of the content they've consumed, which would mean then the people who sign up would be better aligned with us. Therefore, even this idea of list sanitization or list hygiene won't really come into play. Yeah. So it's just fascinating to see just changing the timing, like Matt said, you know, having it at the email capture at the beginning versus the email capture after they've consumed content can have huge difference in terms of who we attract as our ideal customers and clients.
Yeah, we'll have to flag that for an episode, that notion of hygiene. Again, horrible idea. Again, the gurus say this is what you should do. Just bad relationship building.
Well, and I was going to say, you know, as far as this concept of closing the loop, Matt, where exactly are people captured? Because it is just kind of a fact of business life that, you know, unless we have a brick and mortar store like my grandfather did, where we've got material that we are actually exchanging and we've got traffic coming in, at some point, the tools with which we are selling to people online, you know, typically an email list is part of those tools, because the vast majority of people and you know, lots of studies with this on brands, there's certain brands that it takes 20-30 years for people to see them before they're ready to buy, talking about things like Mercedes-Benz, Lexus. And we know that other brands, even online brands, and Infusionsoft will point to this data, that, you know, it's not just the first time that they see us, but, seeing us and having that conversation multiple times, many times the safest place or the most private place to do that is through email. So is there any role for email in this? And I guess my question is, if they give 5 minutes of their time to do a survey, do you then have them give their email address before telling them the answers to that survey, or what are your feelings on that?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a single answer, but it's recognizing that email address is valuable, that each person is valuable, and I'm trying to find, what will help them. When you were talking, it reminded me of my buddy Tom Poland has this idea of bears coming to the honey, attracting the bears with the honey. If you ever see his ideas on leadsology, it's great because it's that whole notion of bringing people to you, attracting them to you, not forcing yourself on them. But that's the notion, is think through reciprocity. It's not just a checkbox of an idea that, people have different ideas of what's valuable to them, and you want to make an exchange, but you gotta come first. And I don't mind at all giving 100% right off the bat. And, some people, and most people not taking me up on the offer. I think there's just too much idea on this list. I think back to years ago when I ran a very successful business, enough that I had 10 people working full time, could pay them great wages. And our list, if we could call it, this is like 14 years ago, so we didn't really talk much about lists, but if I had a list, it was about 35 or 40 people. And people say, oh, what a crummy list you have. Well, that list was 35 or 40 people I talked to every single week and could generate enough revenue that I could have an entire company built upon 35 or 40 people who also ran successful companies. So small lists are essentially 35 or 40 people that really love what you do and they're helping you. And now my list is many, many times larger than that, yet I still get the sort of response rates we all get. You send out an email and 20% might open it, 25, 30 if you got a really good campaign, and how many people click through, 10 or 12%. So this notion that you have a big list, but really, if you say, well, how many people are actually reading your stuff or clicking through, the percentage is really small. And I think that's true across the board for most folks.
Sorry, I do like the idea, especially for people who are, I'm just thinking physicians in this case, who have medical information to give. That isn't something that we would even want behind a wall. That's something that we would want people to be consuming and, to be able to get pretty freely for those who are brave enough to be putting that information out there, which is a completely different story. So I like that there are options and that it's, there is more than one way of going about this. I think there are other very sensitive pieces of information, especially as you've got more certified professionals who are talking about more sensitive topics where they probably want a little bit more control over who is consuming their information, which is not wrong. It's not wrong to be getting a list in those cases. So, and I think that's the point that I would come to, is that I don't think necessarily any one of these ways is wrong. I think what may be wrong is an illusion, the illusion of, we're initiating a relationship or we're doing a favor for someone, which I think is what we're saying reciprocity is, when in fact it's really not. It's not a favor. It's still an exchange. It's still a mercantile exchange, really. It's just that there's a monetary value to both email and privacy. Is that how you both feel?
Yeah, definitely. And again, I don't think that there's anything wrong with collecting email addresses for a list. You definitely want to do that. Now Messenger in Facebook is becoming the sort of new email list, if you will. Messenger does allow for more of natural dialogue than email does, but the same tactics are being used where you want to capture someone's email eventually so that that becomes, your property, you own it. And, you can choose to do with it as you may. I still think comes down to the question of, for each business owner, what is your priority? For me, my priority is to build relationships. So if I want to build relationships and I want people to trust that what I'm giving them is actually what I'm really giving them, then I don't want to get an email address first and then release the content afterwards. I want to give them content first, 100% in, and then they can choose whether they want to go further with the relationship and provide an email or messenger address if they want. And I agree with you on the sensitive information. And that's when, if you've provided something, they get a sense of, yeah, hey, I'd like to find out more information about this. They can enter their email information and then gain the sensitive information after. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's just, where are we asking? And Matt had talked about this, the timing of that ask and what it says about the balance in the relationship, who's really deciding what is valuable and what isn't. So that's really how I see it. I'm actually excited by this conversation because it's now solved a very real problem for me, because I wasn't comfortable with having, them provide their email address first and releasing the content. And so this has been great, just an absolutely great discussion.
Well, and this is why we're doing this, because the gurus take so many of these psychological concepts that are deep and meaningful and thoughtful and need to be worked out, and they reduce them to just a tactic and a checklist. Well, the gurus can afford to be wrong 98% of the time. Because they have huge lists. If they can get 2% of their list to, they have a 50,000 person list, they get 2% of people to buy, well, that's 1,000 sales. And then they get their JV partners to each do the wrong tactics to stumble through and only get 2% of people to buy. Well, that's another 200 sales times JVs. Then they turn around and teach you those tactics, and you only have 500 on your list, and you'll get the same poor results, 2%, and you get 10 sales, just enough to say, well, I think that was worth my time. And now you doggedly determine to do it again, and you get another 10 sales. And this is how you spend your days and your weeks and your months, just churning through saying, how come I'm only getting 10 sales and 20 sales? Because you're using the wrong tactics. You're being told to use stuff that will work for the gurus because they've got huge lists and a lot of friends. But I just am frustrated that they take these really important, meaningful psychological concepts that can work, and they simplify them. They cut them up and they say, yep, here's the tactic. Just this is the checkbox. Ask people for their email, and then you give them this thing that works. I don't think so. I don't think that's how it works. That's not how it works in real life. That's not how it works with my family. You put 3 people in a room, you can't get them to agree on what is the value of something, or what's fair to one person is not fair to another. There's so much complexity to just reduce this to a tactic and feel this works for everybody. It's just flat out wrong, and that's why you're struggling.
I like that you're talking about scale, Matt, because I think that this is really the big point, is that, a lot of the funnels really work with large scale. They work with small scale too. But if we are a small scale operation, and if we don't have the luxury of legally changing our name when we screw up and we're trying to redefine our reputation, then the type of approach that we may want to consider taking may be significantly different, because this very scalable approach is not relational. And again, it's very easy, if you're churning traffic and churning income, to be a big brand. I don't want to say very easy. It takes a lot of work. However, for many, many people that are our clients, these are people who their businesses really are their faces, or they're already established businesses with established reputations that they like to protect, and that they'd really like to align underneath and really continue online the offline conversation that they already have going. So I really love some of the options that we've talked about today. Thank you both. Any final thoughts, Anita?
My final thought just really, again, comes down to what I've spoken before. Short-term versus long-term game. Which am I in? If I am truly looking to build relationships and attract the most ideal customers or clients for my business, then I'm going to want to start off on the right foot. And so providing 100% of the content and saying, this is what I offer. If you like it, hey, if you want more, just put your email address here. You decide. Versus, well, I've got something special hidden behind here that may or may not be useful for you, but give me your email address first and just maybe this will work out. And so that's, to me, is a very short-term view versus the long-term of, I'm going to respect that you can make your own decisions on what's valuable for you and whether you want to develop a relationship with me. If you do, then enter your email address here so that we can begin this conversation. So I think that for me, and coming from a digital marketing perspective, that kind of sums it up really nicely.
Yeah. And for me, it's, my takeaway is that relationship building is not checking off boxes. If you're into the transactional, if this is a game to you and you like to try all the tactics and that's one thing. But if you are somebody that wants to build relationships with people, you have something to help them with, you have some solution you think you can help them. It's not about checking off boxes. You don't buy a dozen roses for your sweetheart and say, okay, I checked off the I love you. Let's move on to the next thing and expect them to love you. There's much more to it. It's far more complex than just a bunch of check boxes. So relationship building much deeper than the check boxes that the gurus tell you to include in your funnels and your email campaigns.
Well, from Anita Toth, Dr. Matthew Champagne, and myself, Dr. Jennifer Brenton, this was another very successful media marketing show, Season 1, Episode 4, and we hope you join us for the next one. Thanks very much.